Hi, folks, and welcome to this virtual event, the Big Data and AI Conference in Toronto. Sorry I can't be here in person, but next time. And before I get into the presentation, make sure you take some time and see our virtual booth. Bit of an introduction. My name is Bill Wong. I'm with Dell Technologies. My past background is analytics, data, AI, while I was at IBM, Microsoft, and Oracle. And today, we're going to talk about what we've seen in companies building AI applications across Canada. My responsibilities are helping customers coast to coast in all industries. So with that, let's go here. So an agenda, we're going to talk about some kind of key challenges that we see that's common regardless which industry you're from. And then we'll talk about the machine learning or AI ecosystem here. We'll take a look at the data platform, choices people are making for the machine learning platform, and then the infrastructure platform. And then we'll conclude by talking a little bit about some of the best practices we recommend. Okay, so being a data-driven company, this is something that's been with company strategies for many years, and the reason why is because this is not an easy task. Trying to be data-driven means you've got to have good data, very disciplined shop. And here's a quote here that says, most people still don't really use data for a lot of the key decision-making. I was in a firm out west, north of $11 billion, and they just simply told me their culture is that they don't believe in analytics. They think they can make decisions kind of by their gut feel. And while they may be so successful there, I think most people acknowledge, even they would acknowledge that being data-driven would help those times when they're really uncertain. Now, some of the challenges, especially when it comes to higher-end analytics such as AI, on the far left you'll see is a challenge of skills. And that will still probably be the case for the next 5+ years. Getting people who are really skilled in AI it is a bit of a challenge, but also, which is challenging, if you can get skills or train people that you have to become citizen data scientists, is to pick a strategy that is business aligned. What is the right use cases for AI? I find a lot of companies that we work with are struggling with that. Which we help them out with. This slide shows that the fastest growing data center workload in the industry is AI. And you see this chart from IDC, whether it's hardware, software, or services, they're forecasting at least double-digit growth over the next few years. So it's an exciting place to be. Next slide here is we have two Gartner Magic Quadrants here. On the left side, we have BI tools. And a number of years ago, maybe not too many, maybe less than a dozen years ago, you used to see vendors such as IBM, Oracle, MicroStrategy. And the industry's gone through a bit of a disruption here. A vendor named Tableau and its very intuitive visual interface has kind of rewrote the rules of what's important with BI tools. Microsoft has continued to keep its leadership position, but what we're also seeing right now in the BI space are newer vendors who are implementing augmented analytics as part of their tool. A case in point is ThoughtSpot. And their query interface is like a Google query, and it'll prompt you and say, is this what you're looking for? So a very innovative tool, and we're expecting more tools to kind of adopt that kind of capabilities in their tools. On the right-hand side here, big data warehouses, a lot of the familiar ones as well. You're seeing some new entry places here too in the cloud. Now, one of the best practices is to build a data lake to be able to give you access to both structured and unstructured data. And maybe I'll start with the one in the middle. And a number of years ago, again, maybe a dozen plus, MapReduce was kind of all the rage with Hadoop distributions from Cloudera, from Hortonworks, MapR. Today, at least what we're hearing from our customers, that adoption has slowed down. Although it may pick up again because a new entrant is Microsoft SQL Server 2019. So for the database on Linux, they're giving Microsoft customers the option of implementing a Hadoop cluster, and they package that with SQL Server. So we're hoping we see a good adoption there. On the far left here, what you see is the cloud databases and normal just block and unstructured data on storage devices, like from Isilon or PowerScale, are receiving probably the dominant share for building a data lake structure. On the far right are NoSQL databases, and these are databases that are optimized for the unstructured data, be it documents, time series, graph, like Neo4j. We see that growing, but it's probably the smaller share among these three. I put this slide up here because I thought it was interesting to take a survey of what kind of databases people like to use. And from a developer's perspective, and that's different from, let's say, a data professional's perspective, you'll see on the far right, this is a survey that was done worldwide, thousands upon thousands of developers. And certainly looks like the NoSQL databases are very favored there. And conventional commercial databases, SQL Server does the best there. And what I find interesting, having worked at Oracle and DB2, that these two are the bottom two. And I don't believe they're there because of capabilities. They're rich in terms of features, but not to the developer's liking, it would appear. These are two other Magic Quadrants from Gartner that came out this past year and this year. And what it does is talk about the machine learning platform. And this is really an area where it's still kind of like the Wild West. These positions of the vendors change radically year after year, especially on the left there. But what they do tell us is interesting. On the left, these are complete machine learning platforms. And you would think the cloud vendors are there, and Google and Microsoft is there. And they position them as less in terms of capabilities than the on-prem vendors, which I find interesting. On the right-hand side, this came out earlier this year, and what it does is position the machine learning services from the cloud vendors, and they put Amazon there, Google, Microsoft as well. But the message I take when you look at these two is that the on-prem vendors still have a more complete solution when it comes to machine learning platforms. Organizations who are adopting it, regardless if it's cloud or on-prem, are adopting new ways of developing machine learning operations. And again, this always this continuous learning as you feed off data to improve your models. Here are a set of use cases that we see common from all industries. On the far left here, a lot of work into IoT or streaming analytics. And the software vendors that I've decided to put up here, this by no means is a complete list, but these are some of the popular ones. You see open source like Kafka, commercial offerings like Splunk, Elasticsearch, very, very popular here. And then here for augmenting the data warehouse, mentioned before ThoughtSpot, new kind of query tools here. Not going to go through them all. There's much richer list here. I've just selected a few ISVs that we see that are prominent here in Canada. This one, to build the data lake, I mentioned before in earlier chart, the Cloudera Hortonworks. But there are all these tools to manage that environment. And finally, on the right-hand side, machine learning platforms in Canada. H2O and DataRobot have open offices here, but you also have a plethora of options listed here. And again, by no means is a complete list, and some of these tools have capabilities that stretch from use cases from streaming to being a data lake platform. Now, this is an attempt to position a lot of those offerings in a data lake. And regardless of your data lake architecture, most architectures are kind of broken up into an area where you receive data, and the data could be unstructured, like we have on the far left here, be it stored in ERP databases, or unstructured, like in chatbots, machine logs, etc. So a platform to receive all that data, a platform to enrich that data, and then a platform for consumption. Now, usually we don't see one platform going through all unless it's just storage. And here, really what we're looking for in the consumption is speed. So what is optimized for that? On the right-hand side, we see various number of users that we have to cater to. And here are the options for hardware, software for governance. And we'll be going to more details with these. This is the Gartner hype cycle. And they have a hype cycle for artificial intelligence. And what I've done is just select those ones that are hardware related. So when you take a look at what hardware that people are trying to use to optimize AI, some people are talking things like neuromorphic hardware or quantum computing. And while that technology is pretty exciting, it's still very early days for companies to use that. One of the more mature ones, of course, is GPU accelerators. We'll talk about that. And here's kind of the spectrum of AI accelerators that companies are selecting from. On the far left-hand side, for CPUs, general purpose computing, you have the market leaders here, AMD, Intel. So this is where you run your spreadsheets, etc. Now, NVIDIA is probably the 800-pound gorilla for GPUs with its market share. We do see some companies use FPGAs or field programmable gate arrays, and usually in niche type of industries, retail, automotive sector, and what prominent offerings here come from Intel and Xilinx. Now, where the biggest growth is, and where all of startup capital is going, is ASICs, or application-specific integrated circuits. So these are chips that have been designed specifically to make AI run faster, consume less space, consume less heat, etc. So like in your Tesla car, etc. GraphCore as a deep learning chip specialized for deep learning algorithms. ARM is specialized for a lot of IoT type devices, as a number of these. And you may have heard earlier this month, NVIDIA has just recently acquired ARM for $40 billion. So while a lot of the IT budgets are going to these vendors on the high end for data centers, this is the growing market where a lot of the startups, a lot of the new technologies is coming from. Virtualization is coming into the GPU world as well. If you're familiar with NVIDIA's recent announcements, the A100, they ship with it 7 partitions here. And we also have vSphere giving options. And so if you're familiar with VMware for CPUs, it does the same thing. vSphere acquired a company called Bitfusion. And it allows you to slice and dice the computer here, so you only get so much compute power. It also allows you, the end user, to access from the pool of GPU servers. So if you're a data scientist and you need 2.5 GPUs worth of resource, you can make that request, go to the pool, it reserves, and you get exclusive use of 2.5 GPUs, and at the end of your job, you release that back into the pool. Now, another trend that we're seeing in high-end advanced analytics is the kind of the combination of using simulation with AI. And there are a number of use cases here. Probably the better known one is right now with the pandemic, is using AI to predict the shape of the COVID molecule and using simulation to simulate protein folds to see if it's effective against a vaccine. But we see these kind of pipelines in other industries, and finance is likely one that will pick up on that. So on the far left, you may use simulation to have a better idea on risk analysis, but then you use that results as part of your AI model to do better predictive trading. This is just a plug for what Dell's doing in this area. So we recognize that these are trends that a lot of people need assistance with, and I'm currently working with a university out west who is using AI, deep learning, and HPC systems to accelerate what we call molecular docking. And this is a technique that we use to see if compounds are effective against certain diseases. So an AI innovation lab, and it has a number of supercomputers, and with this particular university, we're using our GPU cluster out there to run a recently optimized GPU algorithm provided us from NVIDIA to do this molecular type of docking. Very exciting kind of stuff, really cutting edge, and something that we hope will make a difference. Also, what we're seeing, again, as I mentioned before, where the funds are going is IoT type devices, so pushing the intelligence out there to end user devices. And we have a number of labs out there to help our vendors out there to integrate, to test, to make sure they work with Dell hardware. Now, we see a lot of companies putting things up in the cloud, and we see a lot of companies actually repatriating every now and then. I think the more mature customers, what they realize is rather than do a knee-jerk reaction of, say, well, let's save costs, let's put it up there, is to understand what are the real requirements for the application, where should the data reside ideally. And so once you consider things like data gravity, like where is it today? Do you really want to push a petabyte of data up to the cloud? Do I need near real-time data response time? Is things like security, privacy important? When you weigh those things in, most folks are looking at a hybrid implementation for their AI applications especially. And I have yet to see one firm that uses AI in the cloud really to save money. Certainly it's faster to put it up there, but if you're doing a deep learning model and you have to iterate through, let's say, petabytes of data constantly, you'll see dramatic differences in prices favoring an on-prem approach. Now here's a customer in our backyard in Ontario, and this company was developed from as a startup from university graduates, both from Waterloo and Laurier. And what they did, and you can see in this picture here, is they built this electronic robot. It's like a skid. You put something on top of it, and it goes through the warehouse and delivers it to somebody at the other end so they can put it in another place in the warehouse. Anyway, they've used AI to train the robot computer vision. They have a huge site out in the Waterloo area, a great success story, recently acquired from a company called ClearPath Robotics. So it's a great Canadian success story there. Best practices, I mentioned before, taking a data-first centric approach rather than just knee-jerk reaction to cloud. These are other issues that companies are weighing in before deciding where best to place the data. Things like quality, trying to eliminate silos. All these data practices, if you're an AI, you'll spend more time probably on this than actually developing the algorithm. This is the last slide, and then I'll go to the appendix. Now, the best practice that we've seen in successful AI applications is to make sure that the application aligns with the business. And this is a framework that we take our customers through, that we provide and do with select customers at no charge. But usually most customers will just ask us to help them define what is the art of the possible here? What can we do here? And can you help us out here on how to get there? Are there interim deliverables that we should be thinking about? What's the business case to drive this, etc.? So in your deck, the last 3 slides here are more Dell-specific slides here. And this slide is one of our most recent offerings here. It's a single platform to support that use case I talked about, where you can run simulation workloads with AI workloads all on the same platform. Now, not a lot of folks can do that. This is a trend I expect that everybody will support, but we're one of the first out the gate that can actually do that. Again, if you want to map some of the technologies out there onto the Dell infrastructure, our strategy basically is this. We want to be known as an open provider. So it is in our best interest to try to be as open as possible, support all the leading offerings. And then the last slide I've got here is a bit of an eye slide, but if you go to the web and you're interested in any specific offerings to either build data lakes, machine learning platform, a lot of these have been pre-tested, pre-configured, kind of an easy button to get you up and started. So that's it. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the conference. Bye.